Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today, we'll delve into the events that occurred in Everett, Washington. Around 1:55 a.m. on September 20th, 2017, several people called 911 after hearing loud bangs.
911, what is the emergency?
I don't know what happened, but there were potentially gunshots.
Did you see anything, or?
Yes. I saw them run down the driveway. They were dressed all in black.
When the police arrived at the scene 10 minutes later, they saw a terrible picture on the doorstep. 24-year-old Alicia Canales McGuire was lying right outside the door. Unfortunately, she was already dead. Investigators solved this heartbreaking case thanks to social media and CCTV footage. Alicia was born in Mount Vernon, Washington, to Manuel and Michelle Canales on October 29, 1992. She worked as a caregiver for a good portion of her adult life because she loved taking care of people and always wanted to help everyone. Alicia grew up on a farm and started working at age 5. She knew the value of hard work and often returned to the family farm to help out. Spending time with family was very important to Alicia, and she saw and spoke with them frequently, never forgetting to say, "I love you," when saying goodbye. She lived in Birdsview with her husband Bradley. Alicia and Brad married in July 2017. It was a beautiful beach ceremony at Deception Pass. Thus, the investigators instantly learned that Alicia did not live in the house where she died. It was the home of her sister Amanda Canales, where the latter lived with her 3 children. Amanda had to go to New York for work and asked Alicia to look after her children while she was away. Alicia loved her nephew and nieces and was happy to help. She'd got married 2 months earlier and couldn't wait to start a family of her own. There was a stay-in nanny in the house with her, and she was one of those who called 911. She woke up to the sound of gunshots, and when she went downstairs, she saw that Alicia was lying at the front door and not moving. The first thing the police officers who arrived at the scene did was examine the house. They needed to check if the perpetrator was inside. They carefully examined everything, ensuring only the nanny and Amanda's children were in the house. After the frightened children were taken out of the house, the police started looking for evidence. A car was parked in front of the house. There were shell casings next to it. It meant that whoever shot Alicia was standing next to the car, right before the front door. Several bullets hit the door frame. Alicia was lying face down right outside the door. It didn't look like a robbery. There was no mess in the house. Moreover, it looked as if the perpetrator had not even entered the house. But who would want to take Alicia's life and why? When the detectives found out that it was her sister's house, they began to suspect that it was a case of mistaken identity. Perhaps Amanda was the target, but she was in New York. When the nanny, who was also in the house when the crime occurred, calmed down, the investigators asked her several questions. They asked if she saw the one who shot Alicia, or maybe she knew who would want to hurt her. The nanny said she was upstairs when she heard the sound of gunshots. When she looked down, she saw Alicia lying face down on the floor and not moving. She didn't see the one who shot Alicia. The nanny got scared and called 911.
911, what is the location of your emergency?
Everett, Washington. I heard 2 pops and it woke me up. She is lying in her own blood.
What's her name?
Alicia McGuire. I heard 2 pops and it woke me up.
If you look, can you tell if she's breathing or not?
No, she's not moving. I don't know. I really don't.
She told investigators that, as far as she knew, Alicia had a good relationship with her husband Bradley. However, she gave the police the first crucial lead. She reported that Amanda, Alicia's sister, had problems with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. Studying the reports of the local sheriff's office, the detectives learned that it wasn't the first time someone called the police to this address. All the incidents were related to family arguments between Amanda and Kevin Lewis. Therefore, this version interested the detectives. They found the home address of Kevin Lewis, who lived in another part of Everett, and went there before dawn to talk to him. His house was dark. They knocked on the door, and Kevin opened it. During the conversation with Lewis, the officers asked him if he knew where his ex-wife was, and he replied, "She should be home." He looked like he had just woken up. The detectives asked him to tell them where he had spent the night. He said that he had been at home all night and that his sister and mother would be able to confirm this. He didn't ask what was the reason for the detectives' visit. When they informed him that there had been a shooting in the house where his children lived, he showed no emotion. And it was strange. As a parent, he should have asked if his children were okay, but he didn't ask anything. When the detectives told Kevin that Amanda had been out of town on business, he looked surprised and said, "Really?" That was the end of their conversation. The detectives walked down the street and saw that on 2 neighboring houses, there were surveillance cameras that could help them check the story of Kevin Lewis. He claimed he stayed at home all night and did not go out. However, looking through the footage, the investigators saw a car stopping next to Kevin's driveway about 40 minutes before the attack on Alicia. Then, someone very similar to Kevin left the house through the front door, walked up to this car, and got inside. A few moments later, the car drove away. The recording's quality did not allow the police to say with certainty that it was Kevin. Next, the investigators viewed the footage from another camera. They were able to take a closer look at the car, but it did not help to identify it. All they could see was that it was a light-colored car. They fast-forwarded the recording and saw the car return about 20 minutes later. However, now they saw one crucial detail. The front right rim on this car was different from the other 3. The 3 rims were light in color, and the front right one was dark. The vehicle stopped near Kevin Lewis's house. The same person as in the first recording got out of the car and returned to the house. Whoever this man was, he entered the house about 20 minutes before the 911 calls about a shooting started coming in. After that, the car left and never returned. It was a 15-minute drive from Kevin's house to Amanda's house. It meant this car had enough time to get to Amanda's place. Or maybe this car had nothing to do with the shooting at all. It was too early to tell. Amanda found out about her sister's death a few hours later. She was in New York when their father called and said that Alicia was dead. Alicia got married, was happy, and dreamed of having children of her own, but now her family had to mourn her. When the investigators asked Amanda if she thought her ex-husband Kevin could have been the one who shot Alicia, she replied that she had no doubt it was him. Even when her 8-year marriage was over, Amanda Canales still wasn't ready to openly admit just how toxic the relationship with her ex had been. She had spent a decade with Kevin Lewis, and they shared 3 young children, 2 girls and a boy. But Amanda had been deeply unhappy, and even when they got divorced in June 2017, she lived in fear of him. Lewis had physically hurt Amanda in the past, leaving her bruised, and despite their separation, he was still threatening her. In August 2017, Amanda got full custody of their children. Instead of child support, Lewis was ordered to pay $800 a month. It was a fresh start for Amanda. She focused on her home in Everett, Washington, and as a single mother, she was thankful for the support she got from her family. Kevin threatened Amanda. He said he would take her life. He was a former military man, so he had the training. Amanda believed that she was the target of the attack, but her sister died instead. She even got a restraining order against Kevin, but the latter violated it several times. He wandered outside her house looking in the windows, terrifying not only Amanda herself, but also their 3 children. None of the restraining order violations resulted in police charging Kevin with anything. Just a few weeks before her sister's death, Amanda got severely beaten in her driveway as she got out of her car. She was returning home late at night and parked in the driveway next to her house. When she opened the door of her car, someone attacked her. It all happened so fast that she didn't have time to see the attacker's face, but she had no doubt who was behind it. Considering all this, 30-year-old Kevin Lewis has become the main suspect in taking the life of Alicia Canales McGuire. The investigators believe that he intended to take the life of his ex-wife. Kevin did not know that she was in New York during that time. He didn't know that Amanda had asked Alicia to look after her children while she was away. However, there was an inconsistency in this version. If the man in the footage was really Kevin, it meant he was at his house at the time of the shooting. In addition, his sister and mother provided him with an alibi. Therefore, the police continued the investigation and considered different versions of what happened. They returned to Amanda's house to take another look at everything. Examining the trajectory of the bullets, experts concluded that Alicia was shot when the door was partially open, and the shooter fired at least 7 shots, which originated from the exterior of the residence and came into the interior. Evidence at the scene indicated that someone fired shots standing next to the garage, then moved towards the door of the house and fired again inside the door. The medical examiner identified the cause of Alicia's death as multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso. She got struck by 5 shots. 2 of the wounds showed gunpowder stippling injury. The medical examiner testified that he could not determine the sequence of the 5 shots, but said that the last 2 gunshot wounds to the head were probably the last 2 wounds inflicted. According to the experts, the 7 shell casings found at the crime scene were fired from the same firearm. The bullet wounds to Alicia's head were inflicted at close range. Could anyone have had a personal motive for taking Alicia's life? The investigators analyzed this version but didn't find any evidence confirming this. The shell casings found at the crime scene also attracted the attention of the police because this brand of casings was not very common. These were Russian-made casings manufactured under the Tulamo brand. Since it was not a very common brand, the investigators hoped they would identify the seller of these cartridges and maybe even the buyer. The investigators discovered that Walmart had sold the cartridges of this brand. One of these stores was near the crime scene. Representatives of Walmart told the detectives that a man had recently purchased 9mm Tulamo cartridges, and they had CCTV footage of him paying for the purchase. The detectives immediately went to Walmart to watch the footage. The recording was made on September 18th, 2 days before Alicia's death. They assumed Kevin Lewis could be the buyer, but they were wrong. The man in the footage wasn't Kevin. He paid for the purchase with a credit card. Therefore, the police now knew his name. The investigators checked this man and found no connection with Kevin Lewis, Alicia, Amanda, or the nanny. So now they needed to look for new evidence. After studying all the versions that existed at that time, the investigators turned to Amanda for new information about Kevin. She said that at first, their relationship was good. During the honeymoon, Kevin behaved with restraint. She didn't think that he would gradually become more aggressive and start hitting her. Their relationship ended in divorce, a restraining order, and the fact that Amanda received full custody of the children. But a heartbroken Amanda knew it wasn't Alicia who was meant to die in the shooting, believing it was a case of mistaken identity. She was convinced the bullets had been meant for her, and told police that Lewis had somehow orchestrated the attack. And yet, Kevin was at home at the time of the shooting. The investigators have again reviewed the footage taken on the night of Alicia's death. Now, they noticed something they hadn't noticed before. This low-quality recording shows Kevin, or the man who left his house, walking up to the car and getting into the back seat behind the driver. But why didn't he get into the front passenger seat? In search of an answer, the investigators concluded that someone else was already sitting in the front passenger seat. Therefore, by the time the car pulled up to Kevin Lewis's house, there were probably already 2 people in it, and perhaps that's why he had to sit in the back seat. The police had no evidence to link Kevin to Alicia's death. However, they gathered evidence of Kevin's attacks on his ex-wife Amanda and arrested him. In November 2018, the court sentenced him to 3 years in prison. Meanwhile, more than 1 year passed since Alicia's death, but her case remained unsolved. The break in this case occurred only in 2019 when the police station received a call from a woman who had important information. The detectives had a tip-off about a girl living in nearby Spokane who had been to a party and bragged about being hired to take someone's life on York Road, the road where Alicia was gunned down. The police weren't sure what to think as Spokane was about 5 hours from Everett. The woman who called said she was at a party where she met a young woman who introduced herself as Angelica. The latter bragged about how she and her boyfriend participated in the crime. According to this woman, Angelica said someone died because of a shot in the head. They were shooting from around the corner and were hired by the children's father. Moreover, Angelica said they took the wrong person's life. It was a case of mistaken identity. The police have never announced the details of this case. Only the investigators and family members knew that Alicia had been shot in the head. Considering that Angelica knew many details of the crime, the police became interested in this information. While looking for Angelica, the investigators learned her real name was Alexis Hale. They found photos of her with a 9mm pistol on her social media. Perhaps it was the weapon of the crime. There were also several videos where a man was present in the background. It was Alexis's boyfriend, Jaredon Phelps. On the night of Alicia's death, Alexis Hale posted a video filmed through the windshield of a car. Analyzing the road signs, the investigators determined the exact location of this car at that moment. It was about a 10-minute drive from Kevin Lewis's house. In the following video, taken a few hours after Alicia's death, Jaredon Phelps bragged about a wad of money. The investigators saw 5 comments under Phelps's photo on social media, and one of the comments was from his aunt. When they clicked on his aunt's social media profile, they recognized her as Kevin Lewis's mother. It turned out that Jaredon Phelps was Kevin's cousin. The police had sufficient grounds for arrest. The first person to be handcuffed was Alexis Hale. She screamed and said the cops couldn't arrest her because she was only 17 years old. She knew why she was arrested and demanded a lawyer. During the same time, the police arrested Jaredon Phelps in another part of the city. The investigators used Phelps and Hale's phone records to show that they had driven from Spokane to Everett to carry out the shooting, and security footage from Lewis's neighbors showed someone getting into a car in the early hours of September 20th. The man in a white top left at 1:13 a.m. and returned at 1:37 a.m. When the police went to see Lewis after Alicia's death, he was wearing a white top. Alexis didn't tell the investigators anything. Kevin Lewis was in prison at the time and was serving his 3-year sentence for assaulting Amanda. Therefore, the investigators hoped to get some information from Phelps.
Who was the person that put you up to this? His name is Kevin.
Now, the police had a confession and the name of the man who hired Hale and Phelps. As the investigators suspected, it was Kevin Lewis. They took Phelps to the crime scene, and he told them more details of the crime.
When I initially took Kevin here, he just showed me where the house was, and I turned around and I was taking him back to his home.
Okay. So now, when you come back,
Wow.
where did you park?
Right there, sir.
Now, when you, where you were standing, you see the numbers on the corner there?
Yeah.
Were you standing about in that area there?
Yep, right there.
Okay. When Lexi knocked on the door,
Yep.
how far did the door get open?
It wasn't very far. She peeked her head out, and as Lexi was walking towards us, her back was to the door, the woman was looking at Lexi, and then I came around the corner, and it took her maybe, I want to say by the 3rd or 4th shot, I felt like I was shooting the door. She closed the door, and then I opened it back up, and then I think I let 2 more off, and then I'm gonna say she closed the door again.
You just run at that point.
I ran.
Kevin Lewis, who was already in jail on an unrelated charge, was arrested on charges of aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder for the September 2017 death of Alicia Canales McGuire. In July 2020, Phelps, by then 20, pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder. The court sentenced him to 31 years in prison. Hale, then 18, pleaded guilty to the same charge and got 15 years. Phelps testified at the trial that he had committed the crime for money and the street cred. Phelps spent the money Lewis paid him to get some tattoos and buy a pair of Timberland boots and a Ferragamo belt buckle. He claimed his former girlfriend had got the pistol from a family member and he had shared $200 with her. Lewis pleaded not guilty and faced a trial later that year. The prosecution said that he had paid $2,400 to his cousin and his girlfriend to get his ex-wife out of the way. He'd turned them into teenage assassins, but in a tragic case of mistaken identity, it had been Alicia who had opened the door. Phelps said Lewis had directed them to the home but claimed he didn't know who the target was, just the address. On the way back, Lewis handed Phelps an envelope of money. After dropping Lewis back at his residence, Phelps and Hale returned to the location Lewis had pointed out. The two exited the vehicle and walked towards the home. Phelps stopped next to the garage while Hale went to knock on the front door. As Alicia opened the front door, Hale walked off, and Phelps fired the gun until it was empty. Phelps fired the first few shots from his position near the garage and fired the last couple after walking up to the front porch. The muzzle of the gun crossed the threshold. The last couple of shots were around the neck and head area. Phelps and Hale left in their car, but then returned because they believed they might have left a glove at the scene. When they returned, they saw police cars, so they turned around and left. They accessed GPS directions and drove back to Spokane. The defense argued that Lewis had never actually used the word kill when talking to his cousin and had simply said to get the target out of the way. But the prosecution reminded the court of Kevin's history of violence and the threats he'd made against Amanda. This case is about power and control, they said, and the intention was clear. Amanda called him pure evil. She recalled in disbelief how he had played with their children, who were in the house when she was meant to die. I thought that you loved them, but someone who loved them would never want to subject them to danger and to trauma, she said. Did you care that if it was just me home that night, they would have woken up to find their own mother dead, lying in a pool of blood? She also talked about finding a safe home for her children. They're healing and they're moving forward, despite all of the damage that you caused, she told Lewis. And in case you're wondering, they don't ask about you or talk about you at all. In November 2021, after a 6-week trial, the jury took less than 3.5 hours to find Lewis guilty of first-degree murder. In January 2022, then 34, Kevin was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Thompson also ordered Lewis to no longer have any contact with his ex-wife, his children, and Phelps and Hale for the rest of his life. Records indicate that he remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla County. Share your opinion in the comments, and thank you for watching this video to the end.